Next pass, my engine just quit. I crashed headlong into all these tree trunks. And that's how I found it a year later. I could see all the scarring on the trees from where my wings broke off. Even though I am doped up, tubed up,
broken.
I mean, I am delirious. First of all, no tunnel. It's as if I teleported in. Boom, I'm there. As I looked at these, I realized these are all events from my future. Why is that? And I said, well, where am I? And it said, you're in the in-between. I said, in between what? And it said, everything. You're standing inside the eternity of a single moment.
I'd like to welcome to the show Jim Bruton. How you doing, Jim?
Hi, Alex. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming down to Next Level Soul Studios, man. I appreciate you making the trip out here. We're here to talk about your books, In Between, A Trip of a Lifetime, and the practice of In Between, The Art of Letting Go, which is based upon your near-death experience. Now, what was your life like before this near-death experience? Because you lived a pretty exciting life.
I was really blessed to live an exciting life. If I were to write the cocktail napkin version of it, it would be, imagine a little boy growing up in the 1960s. Kennedy had made the promise, we're going to the moon. And then every popular mechanics thereafter that came to the door was, here's the flying saucer in every garage, the jetpack to work, moon tourism by the year 2000. And I mean, any little boy with a huge imagination is going to just bite into that, right? So my life was full of imagination. I was an only child, so I'm really living in my head a lot. And I also loved to watch on our little black and white TV this show called Wild Kingdom. It came on every Sunday night just before Disney, and it was Marlon Perkins and Jim Fowler traveling all over the world, filming their adventures with animals, usually different conservation programs that might be going on. But it was everywhere. And of course, there was always the joke, Marlon's telling you about Mutual of Omaha Insurance while Jim's out running the bear to get into the tree. But I just remember watching that thinking, how do I do that for a living? And then I'm lining these up because they all come to a head. And then my father learned to fly in 1962 when I was in first grade, and I probably had 10,000 hours as a passenger by the time I was in college. And so being up in the air was very comfortable to me. But in the 60s, a couple of really great films about old airplanes came out. One was a fictitious race across the English Channel in 1910. And another one was about World War I, the fighter pilots, the first sort of knights of the air. And back then, when airplanes were fabric and wire and wood and brass, I mean, they were like works of art. And there was also an age of discovery. You go fly, you come back and you tweak a few things and go try, see if I can go faster, higher, whatever. So those were the main milestones of sort of, like I said, a discovery or excitement for me as a child. So think about the idea that I want to live in that science fiction environment now, and I want to invent something in technology. I want to help bring that future in now. The other was, and I want to film wildlife and travel all over the world. And now I want to build this airplanes. It's like, how do you tie that together? Well, I got to. I have an Emmy for work with National Geographic, living in Africa off and on for 14 years, making wildlife documentaries. Wow. So I got to do that. And it was while I was out there that Disney came out to scout a location and had an early version of a satellite telephone. We're 300 miles from anyone, and I'm watching them unfold these boxes, unfold this nickelized polyester dish, and talk to their studio in L.A. And I'm thinking, it would take me 6 weeks if I left right now and drove to town to mail a letter to get a response. And I said, hey, has anybody ever pushed video over that? And they go, we don't know. I said, I'm going to figure out how to do it. And I was the first in the world to figure it out. Wow. And that changed my life, and it really has changed. It sort of started things in motion that's changed how news. I mean, everybody with a cell phone with a camera is a citizen journalist now. This pointed in that direction, and it truly disrupted. Anyway, I could talk more about that later, but it was like shrinking a TV truck down into a backpack. And I've been to all 7 continents, North Pole, Mount Everest several times, in a lot of war zones because I became a war correspondent for NBC News. I integrated some interesting medical devices that were destined for the space station and went back to Everest twice in a row, and I was a lecturer at Yale University School of Medicine.
So you had a pretty full life. It seems like you weren't off the track, which is what I hear a lot of near-death experiencers say.
Right. No, I was pretty plugged into the world and achieving something. Like, what's the next thing we're going to do? That's
you're having
insane?
fun. It sounds like you're having some fun.
Really, and then when I was a war journalist, as I mentioned, for NBC News. I was over in Iraq in 2003, and then I thought, you know what? It pays well. It's nice to be on camera. It's nice to be recognized, but I don't have a family life. Wouldn't it be kind of nice to just have some normal? Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's a part of that world that it's just almost like there are no rules. Anything can happen. Anything goes. It's like, I just need some boundaries. So I met a widow with 3 babies and married her and went corporate, taking my knowledge of video compression and satellite communications and all that. And I went to work for Pfizer, and then I was at Ernst & Young, and I was at the UN. Just sort of bouncing around doing that, but enjoying that as well for that constancy. And it was at that time my wife said, well, now that you're not traveling, but you're kind of used to that high testosterone life, why don't you build those old airplanes you're always talking about? I said, I will. So I did. I built a World War I fighter from Germany, like the Red Baron flew, but I put my own white and black stripes on it. And it took me about 8 years to build that, but it was worth it, and it was fun. It's kind of like riding a unicycle. If you really want to go somewhere, you use something else. Yeah. And then after I built my Macho plane, I built another airplane that was more whimsical, like something out of a Disney cartoon. It was a tiny little plane from the 1930s in France called a Flying Flea. And that's the plane I was flying on its second test flight when I lost my engine and crashed. That brings me up to the next part of what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Well, like I said, you seem like to be having a really pretty fulfilled life. Mm-hmm. I indicated before that many near-death experiencers say that they had their near-death experience because it was a wake-up call, or they were on the wrong path and they had to get pulled back, or it was an option for them to leave because their soul contract wasn't working out the way it was supposed to. Mm-hmm. But you seem to be like, hey man, I'm building planes. You've gone around the world. You've lived multiple lives essentially in this one life.
It's true. A lot of the things I got to do, like, whether it was get an Emmy or the King of Malaysia giving me the highest honor a non-Malaysian can receive for helping them up at Mount Everest, or lecturing at Yale, or being an NBC News. I mean, each one of those things is almost a singular lifetime achievement.
Absolutely.
But it's like, that didn't define me. Like, right. If I had an Emmy, it was a doorstop.
Sure, of course.
I just don't think about it, And it's more like the evolution part of this is where I was focused. Mm-hmm. What's the next step? Where can I push next? What can I understand next? It had nothing to do with the achievement itself. It had everything to do with the evolution.
So tell me what happened on the day that you went to the other side.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So that was October 6, 2016. Just built my little Flying Flea. I'd had a test flight a few days before, and it was okay. It was very, experimental. I wasn't quite happy with the way it handled, so I thought, well, let me go up and get used to it. Mm-hmm. And so it was on that second test flight. I took off, came around once the airfield, and then on my next pass, my engine just quit. And I was able to get it started. I didn't panic because, panic is contagious, so just don't. And I got it started again, and it quit again. Well, I was dropping altitude, and this was in Connecticut, in the countryside, and it was very hilly, very rocky, and very forested, and I couldn't make it back to my grass strip. Luckily, next door to it was a Boy Scout camp, and they had a small lake, and the front of my plane was shaped almost like a boat. And I was like, I'll just aim for that, and it's an open cockpit. I'll just land in it. Whatever happens, I'll pop the belt, I'm out. So it almost went that way. And what's funny is I had to go back to the crash site.
We are in a time of great change, and humanity is awakening more and more every day. Mankind needs insights on what is happening to all of us. That is why I'm inviting you to Wisdom from Beyond, a 6-day virtual summit designed to awaken your soul. Experience over 9 hours of soul-expanding channeling sessions led by 6 of the world's most esteemed channelers. Connect with the divine, receive sacred insights, and transform your journey by asking questions directly to the channelers themselves. This is more than just a summit. It is your gateway to understanding the profound shifts happening within and around all of us. Plus, when you sign up, you receive exclusive bonus content to deepen your spiritual exploration. Join us and step into the extraordinary.
I think it was a year later I went back and I was able to work out what my thinking was, because when I crashed, I'll tell you about the crash in a second. When I crashed, it knocked out 2 days of memory out of me. I don't even remember crashing, which was probably a blessing, right? No PTSD. I could go fly again, no problem. So what happened was I was aiming for the lake, and I wound up, when you come down close to the ground or the water, you come into something called ground effect and actually extends your glide. So I overshot the bank. So in the equivalent of a soapbox derby car with a 7-foot propeller spinning in front of my face and a big BMW motorcycle engine, I crashed headlong into all these tree trunks. And that's how I found it a year later. I could see all the scarring on the trees from where my wings broke off. And I stopped in probably about 10 feet. And I ruptured both lungs, broke all my ribs. My right leg had multiple fractures. The battery broke loose and hit me in the back, 70-mile-an-hour projectile. Oh, and then I was fine. But, luckily for me, because that was in October, the Boy Scout camp was closed. But there was this retired... Essentially, they reported him as a retired teacher, which he was, but he was also a retired police officer. Thank heavens, because think about it. Police officers seen trauma, car crashes all these things. And if he had just been a teacher, he might have freaked out, and that would have gotten me killed. But he happened to have his cell phone on him, which he normally did not do, because he liked to go down there for the peace and quiet. And then I come in, anything but peace and quiet. So he called 911, and he kept me kind of propped up, because I said, well, what was going is you weren't breathing, you were gasping, because we know now because you really had no lungs. So the helicopter landed as close as it, probably only about 30 or 45 minutes later. It's like everything was incredibly efficient. I'm amazed. I mean, starting with the fact that he just happened to be there and he knew what to do. And then they put me in the helicopter and flew me up to Hartford's trauma center, where there was a team waiting for me there. And so everything I'm telling you is what other people have told me, because like I said, I only had one memory of when I was in the hospital, and I thought, I'm in an enemy hospital. And something I haven't told you, also did work overseas. And so I escaped the restraints, even though I am doped up, tubed up,
broken.
I mean, I am delirious. I escaped the restraints. Of course, where the hell was I going to go, Yeah. But when I did, my oldest daughter was there, and she called out for help. So they came in. I remember when they came in, I thought, I think I'm escaping. I said, they're going to hurt me now. And
wow, so you were out.
I was, and I really thought, so they put me in bigger restraints, tighter, whatever. And then they told my wife, he's got 6-7 days of 6 to 8 hour operations every day coming up. We think we should just put him in. And, especially if he's acting like this now. And she said, by all means, do what's necessary. So they put me into a coma. My best, again, it's a best guess, right? My best guess is that when they put me into a coma here, whether it lasted a split second, how you hear how time flows differently, whether it was a second or whether it was a week, I'm not sure. But it seemed like I was there for quite a while.
Okay. So what happened?
Well, let me preface it with this. You know how a lot of near-death experiences have a lot of similarities.
Sure.
I went through a tunnel. Maybe I saw some dead, deceased loved ones that certainly made me feel better about where I was, right? And then and maybe the surroundings and circumstances are not unpleasant, perhaps. It looks nice there. And then they have a life review. And that's a real common one, and it's not about judgment, but it's like you look and see. And then sometimes they might get a big message or have a conversation with an angelic being or something like that. And then if it's an NDE, they come back. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, that's a fairly passive experience. Mm-hmm. I floated through a tunnel. I saw somebody. I saw my life. I got a message. I went back. Mine was not passive at all. It was very interactive. First of all, no tunnel. It's as if I teleported in. Boom, I'm there. And where I teleported was as if it was up on a terrace of a tall building in a post-apocalyptic city. imagine LA or New York 1,000 years after the meteor hit or the bomb goes off or something like that, and it is a dead city. And I was up there, and I was also very emotionless about them. I'm just taking it in. As I looked around, I looked up, and the sky just had literally like the mother of all storms getting ready to unload. Then all of a sudden, this wave of nausea passed through my stomach. And again, it's interesting. It's like I had a body. I don't know if I had a body or not. I'm not aware of it looking at hands or legs, but nothing was, there was no mirror, and I wasn't like sitting there looking at myself. Everything felt like I kind of had a body or an analog of one. And when that nausea passed through, I said out loud, again, this is all so analogous to how it probably really went down. I said, I don't know that I can stand this. And when I said that, I heard the sound off to my left. And I looked over, and on this terrace, or at terrace level, if you will, was this large egg. And I would say it was around 4 to 5 stories high. And it was made out of lattice work. Imagine like taking metal, could have been anything, but metal bands, and then loosely bending them and riveting them together and shaping it so it looks like an egg. But that means there's a lot of open space there you can see through, okay? So I looked over there, and I could hear this little like clacking sound inside. And I knew this thing and I are connected somehow. So I made my way over to it, and when I got up to the egg, I looked through the open lattice work, and what I saw were these gears, and I realized later when I came in, they're called sector gears. When you think of a gear, you think of a wheel with little teeth all the way around it, right? Mm-hmm. You see them in watches and clocks and stuff. A sector gear is a partial arc of a gear, maybe a pi section, and it's designed to move back and forth, which means it has a beginning, middle, and end to its action. That's significant. And as I looked at these, and they were kind of freely suspended in space, in the air there, and they were just kind of slowly moving as if they were in idle, sort of idling. And some were very definite and, sharp. And some were more ghost-like. And they would just either way, they would just sort of pass through each other unimpeded. And as I looked at them, if I looked at one really hard, I had a video feed play in my head of what it represented. And as I looked at these, I realized these are all events from my future. Why is that? Because I saw my daughter at an amusement park with her 2 children, and at this time she was, 18 years old and still living at home. No kids. And I was there with her. And it was really nice. She was putting her kids in the little cart, goes spinning around, and everybody was having a good time. And then I don't know why, I saw myself over at Home Depot buying stuff for a home renovation project.
How did you look?
Well, when I was with the kids, I definitely looked older. I was aware of looking older, but with the Home Depot project, I was just focused on getting. So
did you look like you look right now, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
But with the kids, a little bit older, a little grayer, whatever. Still have my teeth, but but anyway, but I saw other events as well. Here's the interesting thing. I put my hand through the lattice because I said, very concrete, very ghost-like. I wonder if I can touch these, So I did. And when I did, one of these gears brushed by my hand, and I felt this intense pain, like nausea, running through my stomach. Reflexively, and I don't know why this was my reflex, rather than just to jerk back, was to grab that gear, pull it out, and throw it away. I can't explain why that was the reflex, but that was the reflex. And when I did, it's like all the gears just woke up and started spinning around like crazy. And at some point I said, what is this thing? And that's when this disembodied voice joined me, never saw who it was, and engaged with me. And it said, this is the process of becoming. And I said, what do you mean? It said that, basically it said, this is the process of becoming. And I said, well, where am I? And it said, you're in the in-between. I said, in between what? And it said, everything. You're standing inside the eternity of a single moment. And and I said, okay. And I said, so what's going on here with the gears and the thing? It said, basically it told me, these are all probabilities in your future. Think about quantum physics.
Sure.
Juxtaposition probabilities, right? And think about it. At every moment of your life, that is a crossroads of decision in which you can make multiple choice. So each moment in our life is one of juxtaposition probabilities. And it's through the act of observation and choice that one collapses into what we call reality, and the others dissipate. And I learned that was what the gears, the probabilities, the choices in the future that were very sharp and definite were the ones that were either closer in time or more likely to occur. The other ones were further out in time or less likely to occur. Like winning the lottery. That'd be a very ghost-like one, even though I might go in and buy a ticket, so that indicates a probability, right?
So is it kind of like you were seeing parallel realities of yourself?
It could be, because I definitely was coming to understand more about the multiverse.
Okay.
So it could be, and it could be some of those just spin off. In other words, if we live for example, and we know this number is just random, 1 million different lifetimes. And the whole idea is like reincarnation. If there is no past and future, we're living those lifetimes right now, which only hints at what it must mean to really be a child of God. We have no clue what that means, because we're able to live millions of lifetimes at any one moment.
Same time.
Exactly at the exact same time. And we're living out a lot of these choices that are these probabilities. Maybe we live them all out.
So right now there's a Jim who won the lottery. There's a Jim who's still a pilot.
And there's a Jim who didn't crash.
A Jim who didn't leave.
And maybe there's a Jim who died.
Or there's a Jim who died in that crash.
Yeah.
And all of these probabilities in just this life. Then there's Roman Jim.
Yeah.
Then there's Atlantis Jim.
Yeah.
And 1,000 of those versions as well. Millions of those versions. It's an infinite amount of expressions.
There's so many facets to the jewel. And it's so interesting if you think about it. When they say when the tide rises, it lifts all ships, it kind of makes you wonder if one of your incarnations is really intent on, becoming, whether you want to call it one with God or one with the void or escaping the cycles of reincarnation, does that lift all the other lives as well?
Well, so my understanding from my studies in Eastern philosophies and Eastern thought, and many of these avatars on the wall here behind me, to my understanding is that if you, Jim, currently in this lifetime can reach enlightenment or pure self-realization, that is an explosion in not only the multiverse of your existence, and it scatters through all your lifetimes, future and present, but it also affects your soul group of your parents, your grandparents, your relatives, your daughters, everyone in your soul group in all of their lifetimes.
I've heard it 7 generations back and 7 generations forward.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well. It's like that. There's a number of all of them.
But since we're all connected, like I'm connected to you, you're connected to me, it can't help but help everybody.
Well, of course. I mean, the more people who become enlightened, the more people who are awakened, period, on the planet starts to change the consciousness of the planet, which is what's happening. It is.
It's so obvious. People are just saying, you know what, we're tired of the same old crap. And look at it. I mean, the fact that, look, we voted Obama in because we were tired of the same old crap. We've tried it both ways in terms of conservative and liberal, and we're still aching for the answer that will, yes, we can all be productive, we can all be safe, we can all have peace, a better world overall.
Right.
There's such an ache right now for it that I think people are really willing to push the boundaries of what they understand and continue to try new things.
Absolutely. And they voted Obama in, but they also voted Trump in. So there was a large swath that wanted to go that way because they were tired of the way it was going, and vice versa.
These are the swings.
It's always swings going both ways.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's more erratic now than I've ever seen it. I mean, I've been walking the earth for a few years now, not as long as you, but a few years. And I've seen the decades that I've been alive, and I've seen how politics, I've seen how the economy, I've seen how we look at education, how we look at religion, how we look at spirituality. It's changed so dramatically. These conversations weren't happening 10 years ago.
No.
15 years ago.
And if they were, they might have been in secret. They certainly weren't being televised.
They weren't reaching millions and millions of people.
No.
It just wasn't a thing. Where now, not only are they reaching that through other alternative media, because you were part of, ABC News, which was a reputable, it still is a reputable news organization, but the new media gets much larger numbers.
It's so true.
I mean, this show gets better numbers than CNN.
You have quite a
Fox.
few number. You got a very high number of subscribers.
Yeah, it's not only the subscribers, but views on episodes
Yes.
that are much higher than shows on major networks.
So
I'm not
true.
I'm not boasting myself. There's
No.
other shows that have the same kind of reach that I do in many other areas.
It's the nature of how people consume media.
Right, but the thing is that people are now getting access to information that there is no gatekeeper anymore.
I was going to say that when you watch television, you're very aware of this barrier between you,
All
the
television.
audience, and the talent.
Movies,
but
TV,
in
all
this
of it.
modality, it's so much easier to feel closer to the source. Like
It's me.
like the chance that you reached out to me and said, "Hey, let's do this together," versus if you were Walter Cronkite.
And 1,000 other people are in between you and me, and having to organize it and having this and that. When you get here, there's 45 people in the room, and you only see what 3 people are doing, and you don't even know why the other 45 are in here.
And I think this is something people have also hungered for, is to feel closer to the source of all this information, and to feel like where they think it's almost like they have the opportunity to better see where they fit into it.
Well, I think they're all striving to get closer to source, period.
Yeah, exactly.
They're looking for truth because they've been told, I want to say lies, but they've been told different stories throughout history that they're starting to realize, hey, that doesn't make sense anymore.
Right.
And the second the internet really kicked in the late 90s, that's when you saw it happening.
Sure.
The information changed. Now anybody could talk about anything, which is good and bad at the same time, because it's a freedom of information for everybody. Right. And it goes on both sides.
Sure.
But we were able to start exchanging ideas, seeing what's happening on the other side of the world that wasn't curated completely by a giant organization.
You could talk directly to the people who are living there. Like you could talk to people who lived in Kabul, Afghanistan.
Correct.
They'd be in a school. You could connect schools together. Remember, there were all these movements like, let's connect the kids together and like really jazz it up. With China, with Russia, with Africa, whatever, that digital divide they talked about. As we tried to close that, how was that represented? A lot of times it's like, let's connect the kids together as well as people who are doing research, whether it's medical or physics or whatever. And when we talk about how the more diverse your team is, how the better it is. I mean, the bridge of Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
It's about as diverse as it got.
I mean, Star Wars too, the Wookiee.
Yeah, there you go. Throw him in. But it was a better team. It was a better solutioning, and so that's what this really pointed to, and it still points to, because we're not going back.
No, I don't think you can't take the eggs out of the cake. It's already in there. I don't think we're going to be able to go back.
No.
I think that even moving forward, I think we all as a consciousness will not go back to the 80s or 90s or to another world war. I don't think that we're going to agree to that. There's a lot of older systems that are still holding on to power, trying to.
Sure.
So like the death rattle of a lot of organizations in all parts of our lives. But I do believe that we all agree that we're like, no. Even the wars that are happening right now, when they started happening, everyone was like, what? Like there's a large swath of human beings on the planet like, what? What year is this?
Right.
Like, you're going after land? When was the last time you saw a war after land?
Right.
A major war with like, I need land back.
Sure.
It's been forever. And then of course Gaza and all that stuff. Like, geez, how old is that fight going on? So it's like, why is it like? And from what I understand, and please let me know what you think, all this stuff is being thrown up so we can see it in the light.
Yes.
To clean it out, but it's going to be messy.
Well, that it almost speaks to education. The viewers are becoming more educated.
Oh.
And as we were talking about earlier about how the model of television has changed in favor of the internet, is that you can be in television and be an executive and still trying to hold on to that model. But what is a king without the kingdom? Right. What happens when all the subjects leave?
Well, that's
You're
what
not a king.
Well, that happened in newspapers.
Yeah,
Newspapers
exactly.
were
In magazines,
in
everything.
magazines, the movie theaters.
You either go, yeah.
I mean, but network television. Do you think network television is going to be around in 10 years?
No.
In the way that we see it now?
No, it's interesting. I mean, how are they going to try to hang on? By changing their programming up? But I'll give you one example in which it's changed. I think, CNN is struggling right now.
They all are.
And they've said, gone are the days of the big paid, highly paid anchors.
Oh, that's gone.
There are no more Peter Jennings, Walter Cronkites, and no,
Dan
they're
Rathers.
going now.
Yeah, that's
you
all
can't pay those people what you were paying them before. And I've even seen out in the field teams, they're using foreign stringers now.
Of course.
They were not flying these people all over the place.
Because the model doesn't work anymore. And
The
Hollywood's
model
the
doesn't work
same
anymore.
way. That's why we don't see as many blockbusters as we
Yeah.
did before and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But that's just examples of the change of what's happening. We all see it.
I think it points also to it's almost a democratization of the business model in general. Let's face it, anybody can start a, not that this is that case, but a kid can, YouTube influencers as an example. Everybody wants to be one and a few people are, but the fact that could happen at all is a case in point.
Correct.
Like I live enough of an interesting life that people want to see me
Well,
live it.
if you would have been born at this time and lived the life that you lived, foreign correspondent, I could see you on Instagram, like here I am. Like, you could be an influencer when you were a younger man. Absolutely. But I could have probably had something like that going on too. Not as nearly as exciting as yours, but that world doesn't. It's just different. It's so bizarre and different for people. Because I like you, I border both sides.
Sure.
I border Hollywood.
That's right.
Because I come from it for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I also understand YouTube and the new media, and they do not know how to speak to each other.
Right.
At all, and they look at each other like a foreign adversary in many ways. It's really interesting,
and it's like our understanding can barely keep up with the development. So it's really hard to kind of get in front of it, as they would say, to really understand where it's coming from, to really understand where it's going to, so that you can put it around any type of analytics that are meaningful. We can try. But a lot of times it's just by throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks and saying, okay, is this describing a pattern? Is there any kind of predictive value to this?
So when you're there with the egg and this big voice, was any of this in the purview at that point? Like you saw old systems coming down or anything? What did you see?
The only thing I was there to do was to keep putting my hand inside it and finding a gear that hurt. And the pain it was causing me, I came to understand, was a potential choice in my future that would be to my spiritual detriment.
Interesting.
And let's put it this way. Imagine one of those choices that looked pretty definite was you're going to win the Powerball.
That's good.
But imagine I touched it and it caused me pain.
Of course.
Because maybe I become the world's biggest jerk.
Of course.
Maybe I hurt a lot of people. Maybe I
course.
cheat on my wife. Maybe I, not nice to my kids. Whatever, a lot of things that, people might fail at. But you could imagine if I'd had the wherewithal, I might have tried to argue my way. Oh, come on, let me win. I promise I'll be good. You know what? Let's just cut to the chase. Here's the pain it's going to cause. Do you still want to talk about this, or do you want to just get rid of it so it stops hurting? It's almost like building a mouse maze, and there's only one way you can run it.
Sure.
And so... And that came up. As I was removing these things, I even said, I turned around and saw this huge growing pile of gears, and I said, it looks like if I don't have a bad life, I have no life at all. And the voice said, your number of breaths are already counted. I will worry about your last one. And I said, I don't even know where or when these futures happen. And it said, it's not important. Just have faith in the grand design. And at one point, it said to me, for those who make poor use of their choices, offering fewer possibilities could be called mercy.
Interesting. Oh, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
And so if somebody says, oh, he's hallucinating due to being in a coma, I'm saying, okay, I have two bookends of amnesia, one that's 2 days before my crash and one that's a week after my crash when I came out of the coma. And they both bookend this most lucid moment in my life I've ever had. Explain that to me.
Sure.
I can't be making this stuff up. I really just don't believe it. And anyway, this is the type of conversation we had.
And what else happened while you were there?
Mostly it was just me removing one gear after another while I'm having this conversation with him between.
Did you see what was going to happen in those gears, or did you just feel it?
I was only in a couple of cases do I remember seeing. It was all by feel.
That's the thing that I understand from the other side, that the way that we communicate is instant. And and it's so difficult to explain, but there is an understanding without knowing. Like it's not that you're not knowing, but you can't see it. There's no explanation for it. You just go, oh, that's Bob, and Bob's having this happen.
Well, it's like this. Here, I can look at you. Okay, I know Alex is a man. Right?
Sure.
Over there, if I don't have to ask you how you feel about something, I look at you and I know. You can see the life in things. You can see the health in things.
Well, what else did you see, by the way, besides the egg?
No, that's all I was just focused on was reaching around in these gears. In some cases, reaching up here where I didn't even see them. I just felt something hurt, and I pulled it out and threw it away, and it all spun around again. And that's actually, after what seemed like 10,000 times I did this, it was almost getting to be like torture. Remember I said every time I removed one, all the gears had to spin around to account for the loss of one. There can't be a gap in the universe, so it has to refit itself. And it was getting to be like torture just to watch this thing spin around over and over and over and over again. In other words, it was so many times that it just became so unimportant what all of these probabilities actually were.
So you pulled out basically all the bad decisions that you were going to make?
I pulled out a lot. And I pulled out enough until I felt I just couldn't stand it anymore of looking at all these spinning around over and over and over again. I mean, it's like, just imagine looking at this whirlwind over and over.
But did you hear, so you only heard the voice. You never saw a being or anything like that. You just heard it. And you understood. And there's never fear.
No. Well, that's something I want to speak to. Back in the beginning, when it said, you're standing in between, and I said that, I'm having a hard time understanding it. It said, well, do you remember the world to which your body belongs? And I really tried, and I said, no. I said, then you see the truth and how the past is dust. Because I had no memory of this place. I had no memory of a family. If you'd come up and said, Jim, if you stay here any longer, you can't go back, I'd say, go back where? To your family. What family? What's a family? I had no memory of this place. As I've studied it, it's as if, and I say it's as if because, you think I'm a scholar? No. I was depersonalized down to zero. Right. I didn't have a sense of who I was. If you'd asked me what my name was, I didn't know. I'm just a conscious being. Let me ask you, and it's okay if you say no, but a lot of times when you have a sudden surprise, for example, like you're driving down the road and you almost have a bad accident, when I've had that happen to me before in all my travels, because you can imagine that kind of crazy stuff might happen a lot, I noticed my mind sort of split into two. There's one part that is the active mind, dealing with avoiding the car wreck or putting on the brakes or whatever, right? But there was this other part of my mind that was just silent and observing. No judgment, no fear, no reaction, no anger at whoever pulled out, just watching. And I've talked to a few people who've also experienced something like that. And it's as if this were the silent watching part of me, and the active mind was left behind in the coma because it wasn't needed over there. And honestly, because of that wiping clean what seemed to be any shade of personality, what I brought back was an incredible sense of detachment. It's as if that cut at the roots of so much of my attachment here. And that's continued to be a part of my journey, is discovering the interesting lack of attachment, or to watch attachments. It's like each one of them has their own little gas tank and they're all running on fumes. Now you can imagine some attachments that go deep or long in your life have the bigger gas tank, so it has more fumes it can run on before it quits. Some things which might be no more than, I had just found a new favorite show to watch on television, they fall off right away. And I find, why am I sitting here looking at this? And I'm looking at things in a way that, that seems silly, or that's boring, or that doesn't make any sense, so I go do something with my time that does make more sense. relationships, I mean, I'm sort of taking you fast forward there, but anyway, continue on until I finally, I think, said, I think I can live with this now, because I'm done watching this shit. So, excuse me. And with that, the voice said, because it said at one point that my being there was in answer to a prayer I had made at some point. And I think that was simply, almost like be careful what you ask for. And I'm sure it had to do with, I long to be free of the world, free of the pain of the world, free of the attachment to the world. And I would like to escape the cycles of reincarnation and go home. And it was like, well, then maybe you need to go through this. It was like going to boot camp, and getting your butt kicked. Exactly. It wasn't unicorns and rainbows. No, it was like boot camp. And
so at what point? So now you're tired of looking at the situation. You're still not seeing anything else other than this thing. So you're not seeing anything on the sides or anything else. Right. What happens at this point to come back? At
that point, when I said, I think I can live with this now, it's literally said, pay attention to your relationships. It said, okay. And then as I was sort of starting to zoom back.
You felt it. Did you feel?
I felt like I was zooming back.
Something was pulling you back?
Yeah, like I was coming back here.
Okay.
And it said, all choices have unintended consequences, but live life in celebration of the individual spirit and pay more attention to your relationships. That seemed to be a real key point it wanted to say to me. And with that, I just sort of took everything in and then I came back. However, I can say this, that when I came out of the coma, based on, my loved ones around me talking about how I would say it was a full week before I actually had a functioning mind. And that was already when I'd been moved to a rehabilitation hospital.
So you came back in the middle of the coma, or did you come back when you woke up?
So I came out of the coma. I was in a coma for a week.
When did your soul come back into your body?
Oh, that's hard to say.
Okay.
I mean, I would say somewhere between when I came out of the coma, probably then, but my mind itself wasn't functioning for a week. I don't have a memory until a week after, and that was in the rehab hospital. And I can remember the first coming. It's almost as if I were opening my eyes for the first time, though apparently my eyes were open before because I was carrying on with people. But I remember in the rehab hospital laying there. It's as if I did this, and I'm now here. I'm back. And I remember basically feeling pretty good. But I remember the memory of being in the in-between was just cycling over and over in my mind. Like, I'm not letting you go. I'm going to go over and over in your head. And with each iteration, there was more detail. There was more of an emotional impact. And I was like, what the heck is this? Wow. And I knew I'd had an out-of-body experience. I wasn't sure I understood the difference between an out-of-body experience and a near-death experience, even though to me one's probably a subset of the other. And I remember just looking around, and people were in the room and doing stuff, and that 7 weeks I was in the hospital until I went home. Believe it or not, only 7 weeks after all that. Was actually a pretty nice time. At some point I said to the nurse, I said, this may not be the vacation I wanted, but it might be the one I needed. But what's nice is there was this, how you might have 3 shifts of nurses. And if you want to stop me and ask a question to go in any other direction, by all means. But as I'm taking everybody in, I realized that the A team was that first shift in the day, like 9 to 5, right?
Sure.
Man, they were A team. And there was this one, her name was Jen, and she was super sharp. And I remember one day she just sat there and got really close to my face and studied. And I go, what are you doing? She goes, well, you were cut like this, and you also had a stick sticking through your mouth. But this was all torn up, and it was actually just hanging down. You couldn't have made
How old are you in this?
I'm 60.
No, how old were you then?
60. I'm 67 now.
Oh, this only happened about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well,
okay.
It was in 2016. Well,
that's right.
It's
Okay,
coming
okay.
up on 8,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So anyway, she said, she was studying, she said, they really did a good job of putting you back together there. And even now, you can, in the right light, you can see this scar down here. It's almost like a German fencing scar or something. But yeah, I didn't even know. I still wouldn't have known to this day if somebody hadn't told me. It was pretty amazing. So one day I just looked at her and I said, can I just share with you something that's going on in my head? And I noticed that it seemed like sometimes she was just kind of hanging out in the room, like she just kind of like hanging out with me or energy, talk about life or whatever. And she said, sure. And she just kind of leaned over on the thing and just was ready. And I told her my experience with the in-between. And toward the end, she started crying. I said, why are you crying? And she said, because I don't want you to die. Since I was talking about death, right? And going where the dead go. And I said, well, you're a nurse in a hospital.
You must see death all the time.
And she said, yeah, but you're magical. And I said, well, where are you getting that from? She said, well, you know how all the doctors are busy, all the medical staff's busy. All the patients here might get 15 minutes of their doctor's time every day. For some reason, you have 3 to 5 doctors in here for up to an hour and a half. And I walked by because I'm snooping. And said, y'all are talking about all kinds of things about life and anything but your medical case, and they want to be in here with you. One wants to have you in business with him so bad he has you on international phone calls at night with your leg up in the air in its cage. She said, I've never seen anything like this.
So you started to see the change in people around you.
It's as if, almost like a reverse empathy, almost like a projection of empathy. Like people feel, instead of empathy where I feel connected to you, it's like imagine something's happened and you feel super connected to me. And I remember one night on the overnight shift, this matronly nurse that would go around, she was very quiet and very nice. I remember, like 2 a.m., I'm sitting there like watching CNN or something because that was the 2016 presidential race.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
So, of course, I'm going to kind of watch that and see what's going on. And when I saw her coming in there, I'd like pretended to be asleep, right? And she actually reached over and kissed me on my forehead.
Aww.
It was just such a sweet thing.
Wow.
And
that's so fascinating.
it was really interesting to see when people, and I every now and then these guys, big, strong guys who could carry me, would come in with their ambulance outside to take me over to a specialist or something to look at my back or look at my leg or whatever. And my wife at the time had pasted this picture on the wall of what she thought was the best version of myself. And that was me in northern Afghanistan smoking cigars, gun running for Joint Special Operations Command to the Northern Alliance when I wasn't doing NBC reporting.
You've lived a very interesting life.
Yeah, it was like a double life in that case. So that's who she thought she wanted me to heal back to, right? Mm-hmm. And the minute I looked at that picture, I thought, who's that guy? That guy died in a crash,
Sure.
and I'm not that person anymore. But these guys coming in, a lot of them were ex-military. They were big and strong and really cool guys, and they would say, "Oh, now you got to tell the story, right?" And so they would respond to that, and
big burly guys.
And we'd be like brothers, in arms and stuff like this, and it was really an interesting experience. And
so there wasn't a time that you kept this in the closet.
No.
There was because a lot of NDErs hold on to it sometimes for decades.
I felt this thing trying to push itself out of my pores.
Why did this happen to you?
I think it was the next natural step in my spiritual evolution. I think
is this part of your soul plan?
I'm sure it was, because I think if you look at it from the outside, it could look like a random event, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, your plane quit, or you got hit by a bus, or you fell down the stairs, or you had cancer or something like that, and this happened to you. But I think if you could look at it from within, internally, I think they would all look like this is the next most natural step in your spiritual evolution, is this bump, this kick in the butt, or this jump start. Because I'll tell you, and you've heard this too, when you were talking to people, about the Eastern path and meditating and rising above the body, nothing does it like experience.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, before that, it's just intellectual knowledge. And if you live a life according to, an ascetic or someone who's on that path, as you filter what you see and experience through life in ways that are meaningful to that path, it means you start to see the world a certain way, for sure. But when is it you actually have that jump? A lot of times it's supposed to be at the point of initiation when you're given your mantra and the guru takes you on as a disciple. You say, oh, okay. Now I've had a taste of the other side. I've seen a glimpse of the other side. Now I know where I'm going, and wow, and it's real. I remember one time hearing a story that this one guy who was searching for a guru, searching for an experience, there was like some big bandara in India, and he was like, oh man, there's all these gurus, and some are riding in on elephants, or some are walking in with staff, and they all have an entourage. And he was talking to this one guru. He says, how do you choose? How do you know? And the guru said, you can't, and you don't. He said, so what do I do? He said, do this. As you walk around, you listen to the different gurus talking about, life here and in the grand beyond. Just feel which one kind of has a resonance with you. Which one just kind of sounds a little more right than the others. Spend time around them and around their people, their disciples. He said, notice your mind. In so doing, do you find your mind is thinking less about the things that pull you down to the world? And maybe it's thinking more about the things that would lift you up out of the world. He said, that might be about as good as it gets for a while. Just go with that. Which is so humbling, It's not this big, bugles in the clouds and all that stuff. It's just go with your gut. I thought that's a really good answer I can relate to.
So let me ask you, Jim, if there's someone watching right now, which I'm sure they are, who are in the process of losing somebody, or they themselves know that they are coming to a close in this incarnation, for whatever reason, what words can you give them from your experience and your point of view to comfort either one of them?
I'll say this. First of all, I believe that, and this is if people are reflecting about loved ones who've been taken, I think I was jerked out of my body before the crash. And I think I've heard about this a lot of times with people.
You don't feel anything.
If someone was in a car crash or something like that, I would say it's a good chance they weren't there when it finally stopped.
Yeah, they're not at the very end.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't needed, and that's mercy, right? On the other side, if you know you're going, it's almost like whether your path is one of religion or one of spirituality, I'd say it's going to be less of a surprise if you believe in. Be an atheist if you want, because when you get to the other side, you'll realize, oh, I was just here. Yeah, because this lifetime is just a wink in eternity. And if you were even sitting there arguing with God, like, this time I want to go down and live the life of a drug lord because I like the cars, I like the suits, I like the women, I like the money, I like the power, God would say, well, go try it and see how it works out for you, and then come back and we'll compare notes, because I'm not going anywhere. And it would be about that important. Now,
it's like playing a video game.
Exactly. I would say that for me, I would really characterize it as, like we were talking about, changing channels. When you watch a show on television, let's say you get bored with watching something, you change the channel. Now you're looking at the new program, right? How much are you thinking about the old program? Zero. It doesn't even exist.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that hits true to me, because you're absolutely right. When you're done with an episode of Friends or of whatever you're watching, when you move on to the next show,
you flick over to Seinfeld or whatever, you're engrossed in that. You're absorbed in that.
The old one, there might be a flicker of memory, or maybe if there was something really memorable, you'd remember a joke that you would say to somebody later. But overall,
exactly. But
your focus at that moment, it doesn't matter.
That's how it is.
And if a day goes by, you absolutely forget it.
That's how it is. You literally just change channels. You're here and then you're not here. And it's devastating for the people left behind you. For you, you're like, well, I'm out of here.
But Jim, the thing is this, though, that while we're here, this reality, this construct, you and I are both very good friends of The Matrix, is so real.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when Cypher was eating the steak. I know the steak is not real.
Right.
And, and I know I'm just putting ones and zeros, but I don't care. This is so real. It's hard to
try this.
Pull out.
The inherent truth in this is that things live because our attention gives them life. All right, you and I have both been young men at one time, all right?
Yes, we
and,
were.
if we said, oh, there's this sports car I'd really like to get.
Sure.
Or my first car, I don't care if it's an old Beetle, but there's this first car, right? Or maybe there's this, at Christmas, there's this toy I really want. The only reason it lived was because you gave it your attention. The only reason that car was the hottest thing in the world that you had to have was because your attention fed that. The only reason we had to have that toy at Christmas or our birthday was because our attention fed that. 3 months later, the toy is under the bed gathering dust. Mm-hmm. We've moved on to something else. The first little scratch we get on the car, the bubble popped. And now we're okay.
By the way, no teenager should ever have a new car. I'm
yeah,
just
right.
throwing that out there.
That's true too.
Not one teenager should have any sort of new car.
I agree with you.
Not even a fancy.
Yeah.
No new car whatsoever.
I agree. But you can see how the attention is what gives things life, and the attention is what, and that sense of it has life is what creates that sense of attachment. And it's to these things we are attached.
But we are creators.
Mm-hmm.
We are the ones creating our reality with our thoughts. You know, a lot of people think of that as just manifestation or the secret or that kind of stuff, but we are co-creators with Source, with God, on what we are trying to explore down here in a life.
And I think that's part of it. Let's face it. It's like everybody came down to Disneyland and they're here to ride the rides.
So some are scary and some are fun.
Some are scary and some are fun. But the thing is, when we're a little hard on ourselves and we're trying to be an ascetic and we shouldn't really be having fun and going to dances or whatever the hell it is, it's like you came here to ride these rides.
Right.
You came here for this experience. Now, what's interesting is imagine there are 10 people on a bus that pulls up to Disney World, right? Mm-hmm. They all get off. 5 of them there are met by Disney guides who say, we are going to have the best time today. You're going to ride every ride. I'm going to tell you the history of the ride and the history of Disney World.
First in line.
And you are just going to, easy. The pass is there. We're first in line. The other 5 are standing there in their coveralls carrying tools, watching them go, because they're going to go behind the scenes of all the rides. Like, it's a small world. They're going to make sure all the gears are working and the valves are working and the steam is blowing and all this other stuff and the music is working. They are invisible. And the better they do their job, the more invisible they are. If they don't do their job very good, somebody's going to complain, well, they need to fix this ride. But if you do your job right, no one knows and they just enjoy the ride. Having an NDE moves you to that side of things.
So you're seeing what the workers are doing.
You become more of a conscious co-creator with God. Because you can see the subtle patterns moving in people, in the universe. Mm-hmm. And it's not about controlling any of it.
No.
It's about observing it. And if anything, it's about just surfing the wave. Does a surfer control a wave? No. His job's just to stay on the board and the ocean will take him where it's supposed to go. That's what it's like.
Jim, and I have asked this question to others who have gone to the other side, how do you balance this reality with the knowledge that you have of the other?
I'll tell you this, it makes its own room.
Mm-hmm.
My particular journey has been this. And this is a hard thing to say. I don't know if it's hard to hear. It's almost like when you have an NDE, you've been drafted.
Mm.
You're now a soldier. And guess what? Your evolution doesn't care whether you like it or not.
You've been drafted.
Yeah. You've been drafted. And you go where you're told to go. And you interact with whom you've been told to interact. And you don't always have to know why or where it's going or anything. You just have to show up and do your job. And that's what life is like. And I'll tell you this, in a nationwide divorce rate of about 53%, which means drive through your neighborhood, every other house is falling apart. With NDEers, it's 78%. That's a 50% increase over normal, meaning like 3 out of 4 houses now.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, well, that's kind of how that's your effort of trying to balance. I'll be honest. A year after my NDE, I could still sit there and just stare at the wall for 6 hours because I would go somewhere. I don't know. My wife came in and said, "We're going to marriage counseling." I said, "Okay." Well, that was 18 months of what turned out to be a waste, I guess. And one time when we were there, she was complaining about some bad habits I'd had at some point in my life. I said, but she was a good person and she was honest. She just didn't know what to do with this new version. And I said, have I done any of this? And I couldn't say my NDE because she didn't like it. So I had to say the crash. She did not like my NDE.
Well, that was the beginning of the end.
Well, yeah, it was the beginning. And also she thought, well, does that elevate you? You know,
she's
like you're
insecure.
not perfect now. I said, no, I know I'm
she's
not
insecure.
perfect. Yeah, and a lot of people would be, and I
Of
get
course,
that, right?
no,
I mean,
no, of
there's no
course.
judgment here. And so I said, well, that person died in a crash. This is what you have left. And then I felt the in-between well up inside me. And I said to her, and our marriage vow said, till death do us part. What happens when one of us dies? No matter that we return. I said, our covenant is broken. And the only reason we stay together now is simply because we choose to. And that truth was not well received.
Ooh.
So the eventual thing that was supposed to happen happened. And but the thing is, we remain friends.
Sure.
And we stay in touch. She just didn't see where she fit into my life anymore after that.
You know what's fascinating is, you know, to a much lesser extent, obviously, I felt something similar. Doing the show, there's people who are part of my life who look at it and just are wondered by it, about who we talk about and what we talk about, people I meet, these kind of conversations. They're fascinated, but they're scared many times. They're scared of it, but they're fascinated with it because there's not one human being on the planet who doesn't want to know what happens when we die.
Of course.
Every single one of them do. And not even going into the more esoteric stuff that we talk about on the show, just near-death experiences. It's something they can wrap their head around, and I found it to be a gateway drug in many ways to a lot of other thoughts, a lot of other ideas, philosophies, teachings that they would have never even thought about.
Yeah.
But the near-death experience is the way in. It's very fascinating to see how others project their own fears onto you or me because they're just scared of maybe the source, or maybe it changes their programming, or it messes with their foundational story that they've told themselves their entire life. It's a scary thing to have your whole life, everything you've believed, torn apart in a matter of seconds by a new idea, right?
It is. I'd like to return to a question you asked a second ago and had to do with people who might know they're dying or might be preparing themselves to lose someone.
Yes.
One Sunday morning at 7:30, I had, but between 5 and 7 a.m., sometimes I'll have these dreams that are more than dreams. It's as if it's a meditation with more visual impact. And this particular morning, I saw my wife when she was, we were still together, and I at a clinic, and there was this like 10-year-old boy, bald-headed, so I knew, okay, he's got cancer, and I guess he's our son. And don't really remember any conversation going on. And I'm not sure how many dreams I actually remember a conversation. It's more feelings a lot of times, and you know the importance of seeing someone there. They don't have to tell you when they're there. So anyway, then I woke up and thought, what was that all about? Well, I'm wide awake now. So I go down to make coffee, and I go sit down at the computer, and I have an email from someone, a woman. And she said, I'm writing to you to see what you can say that might be of help to me. It's a certain number of year anniversary since I lost my 10-year-old son due to cancer. And said his brother, who was 14 at the time, is really he's mad at God. Why did God take my little brother, right? And she said, and I'm feeling sad about it. And I said, well, I would probably, I went to my dad's grave one time, and there were balloons all over this one grave near because the kid was 16 and dead. I said, I'd be that parent, putting balloons and cakes. I get it. And I thought about it, and I told her, I said, you were not born here to suffer. And I said, if you believe in the continuation of spirit, and your son could see you, he does not want to see you sad. He does not want to see his brother sad. You literally tear apart the dead. And I think that's one of the things that probably makes them move on in the end. They just can't stand to see people they love in constant misery, and they can't talk to them. They can't, unless there's these moments where the lights flicker or some way of showing them evidence. Exactly, right? It just tears them up. And it would anybody. So they're still human, just without a body. They're going to leave. I can't deal with this, And so I said, you're going to suffer for as long as you choose to suffer. And the reason you're choosing to suffer is you're no longer this child's protector who could save them from death. the only emotion left to you is misery. And you feel like if you let that go, you are abandoning them.
Mm.
You have to turn that around. You're not serving them, and you're not serving yourself. As instinctive as it may feel to not let that last emotion go. But until you do, you will suffer. But it's your choice now. And she actually called me back 3 weeks later and said this in some way helped her.
Mm.
But it's true. It's just like you said, we are the creators of our worlds.
Very true.
So which world do you want to wake up in tomorrow?
Amen, sir. Amen.
So that's my answer.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests, Jim. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
I think it starts by living whatever it is you perceive to be an authentic life.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you live an authentic life, you can be an atheist and living a spiritual life.
Oh, absolutely.
Because how many people are living a religious life, but they're not living an authentic life?
I know many.
So how can you get closer to God? You know,
Sure.
If you're not Socrates, man, know thyself. If you're not saying this is who I am, as out in left field as it might be, or as crazy as it might appear, or whatever. And, you know, like on Facebook when they say, live your authentic life. No, not that way, you know. So that's how it is. But it takes guts to do that.
Mm.
And it takes an honesty. But until you do that, how could you live a fulfilled life? Mm. So I think when you live a life of authenticity and you really start letting go, the art of letting go, I mean, what I was told was all the force of will you'll ever need is found in the art of letting go. Always celebrate life of the individual spirit, for no one and no thing can stand before the brilliance of a truly naked soul. Mm. So if you can go down that path even an inch and start to realize, well, this is what resonates with me. Right. These are the kind of people who resonate with me. This is the kind of music that resonates with me. And it's not how I was raised, or it's not who I thought I was, because I've been living all my life trying to be something else to other people to just get through the damn day, to just get through life, to just be accepted, to just get the job, to just get the wife or the husband, and then have the kids, and then fit into the PTA and all the other stuff. Who the heck am I?
Yeah.
And so start one step at a time. Start with authenticity, and you will find your fulfillment.
If you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Jim, what advice would you give him?
Hang in there.
That's a common answer.
It's not always gonna be like this. I think that's the thing, is that almost like slow down, take your time,
enjoy,
and don't panic. It might seem tough right now, but life is a long time. And also keep your eyes open. It could be that all the different things you are going through that don't seem to be related will all connect one day. And when you're living this incredible life one day and traveling all over the world, you're going to be able to solve problems and see life and see people from so many different angles because you're doing all these things. Mm. And sometimes, because so much of our life is based on relationships, sometimes you get to the crossroads early. Mm. And the only way to hunt is to sit and wait.
Beautiful answer. How do you define God or source?
I think it would be closest probably to the Taoist, because I would say if I were to trend toward anything anybody could try to put form to, it'd be Taoism, which is so formless. And that is probably thinking of it as the void. And the reason I say that is John Milton, from the 1500s in England. He himself said the highest aspect of God is that which is not manifest.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's beyond duality, right? Mm-hmm. And certainly the Tao speaks of this. And I think, to me, the people who are really plugged in say that. And that makes sense to me because it's the ultimate ambiguity, the thing which we are not comfortable with, as you said right now. Why do people get scared of this stuff? Because to them it's very ambiguous. They don't know where it's coming from. They don't know where it's going. And they just, hey, hold on, Nelly. We're coming through. So to me, God and the highest state of being is that which is not manifest. It's when we talk about the juxtapositioning of all those probabilities, the will is free until it acts. So it's when you wait to the last possible moment to choose from all those probabilities that you are at your most powerful. because that's when you have the greatest number of possibilities that you can choose or that you can be. That is that state of ambiguity. That is that state that they have not yet manifested.
Beautiful answer. What is love?
It's not what a lot of people think. Most people, what they think of love is attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you a question. Can I answer it obliquely and then let's zero in?
Sure, let's go.
So, a lot of people think, oh, I wish I could tell the future. I wish I had the power of precognition, right? I'm saying, okay, let me ask you a question. I personally think that we make a conscious choice not to have those things.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're a mother. You've got your child. You're packing their lunchbox. You're tying their shoes. And you're sending them out the door across the street to wait for the school bus. Could you do that if you knew that was the day the bus was going to jump the curb and mow down your kid?
Of course not.
Right. Magnify that times everything else. We would never get anything done because we're too busy trying to change the outcome of so many things on any given day. And yet, what's love and what is attachment? Meaning, I believe if you had true love, you could let things unfold the way they're supposed to. And that would be very hard to do.
Well, I mean, if someone asks me, do you want to know when you die? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't want that information. I don't want that information at all. Because it would skew the entire journey, the entire game.
I understand.
And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
To escape the cycles of reincarnation and return home.
And where can people find out more about you, your work, pick up these 2 books, The Practice in Between, The Art of Letting Go, and A Trip of a Lifetime, The In Between?
Thank you. Well, I've just revamped my website as of yesterday. It's www.inbetweenproductions.com with an S. Inbetweenproductions.com. There's my story. There's the conversation I had with the In-Between. There are 2 links to Amazon for both the books. And there's even a page if you want to send me like almost like an email.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about if you want to schedule some time to talk for an hour or so. There's a calendar feature there for that. And, if anybody has any question they're wrestling with or they just want a very direct, different perspective, because I'm pretty direct.
I know.
And because I don't think if we just hug each other all the time, I don't think that does any good. If I talk about I'm holding space for you, or I'm sorry, I hear so much of that. I like in the in-between, there's no holding space. You're getting your butt kicked. And maybe the holding space stuff only takes you so far. If you're so worried about I need to be in a safe space, if you're so much into you need people to hold space for me, I'm not sure you're going to get your money's worth out of what you're going through.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, learning how to ride a horse is fun, but, man, your butt's going to be sore for a little while. Those saddle sores bring wisdom. And, I mean, I would say that's who I am, because it's really about, like I said, your evolution doesn't care whether you like it or not. And my core belief is this, that nothing was put here for your enjoyment. It was put here for your correct use. And it's in its correct use that you find joy.
Jim, it has been a pleasure and honor having you on the show, my friend. Thank you so much for coming
Alex.
all the way down here to do this episode with me, and for helping the world awaken just a little bit more at a time.
You're doing great work here, and I'm so glad to have come in and been part of it today. Thank you, Alex.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.